It is customary at the start of a service like this to begin with a greeting, such as welcome or good morning. And I do welcome you all this morning, truly, but I would like us to withhold judgment a little bit on whether or not the morning is in fact good. I would like you to, if you will, engage your imaginations for a bit with me as we examine a morning, I won't say this morning, but a morning, and see if it is, in fact, good. Here's the situation. You are a young scientist interning at a huge research facility with a board of directors known to be disconnected and out of touch with the researchers, yet prone to snap decisions and making impossible demands. You have just crawled out of bed in your studio apartment adjacent to the research compound, and you are preparing for a long day at work the same way any sane person would, a hot cup of coffee. As you sit there waiting for the caffeine to kick in and pondering the meaning of life, you are broken out of your reverie by a loud pounding on the door. Your puzzlement heightens as the door splinters to pieces and campus security rushes into your room, brandishing weapons. To your astonishment, the head of security announces, "Since the scientists of this research facility have failed to produce a cold fusion reaction as requested, the board of directors has determined that all researchers will immediately be put to death." What do you think? Good morning? What would your reaction be under these circumstances? Now, I know this illustration feels a little far-fetched. It is a little far-fetched, but around 2,500 years ago, a similar scene unfolded for our young hero, Daniel. As we pick up our tale from the last sermon I preached back in November. Daniel 2 is today's text. Daniel 2 certainly isn't about scientists or a board of directors, but Daniel's life is just as much in danger because of just as impossible a demand as what we imagined a moment ago. And Daniel's response to this dilemma is inspiring. Basically, he said, "Take me to the board of directors, and my God will reveal the secret of cold fusion." Well, not exactly, but you get the point. Before we go further, though, I have a caveat or two about our text for today. The second chapter of Daniel is pretty long, so we are not going to read the whole thing, only portions of it. I will do my best to summarize some of the bits that we don't read, to fill in missing details. It is a familiar story, so hopefully that won't be a problem. Daniel chapter 2 discusses the tale of Nebuchadnezzar and his great dream and his impossible demand of the magicians. Tell me not only the interpretation of my dream, but also tell me what the dream was. That's the impossible demand. It's not possible. I mean, unless the magicians were truly magicians who were given wisdom from their gods. But even they were saying, this is impossible. We cannot do this. Before we get, though, to the dream itself and to Daniel and his reaction and things it shows about his character, we need to spend a little time on Nebuchadnezzar himself in order to understand the predicament that Daniel and his three friends find themselves in. We should know something about this Nebuchadnezzar. Who was he? What was he like? Well, as king of the ancient kingdom of Babylon, he was a despotic monarch, meaning he ruled with absolute power and authority, and he could do, really, whatever he wanted. That's why he could issue a command for his magicians and wise men to do something impossible, something as impossible as telling him not only the interpretation of his dream, but the dream itself. It's also why he could issue the command for all of them to be torn limb from limb if they failed. Interestingly enough, this was not that uncommon a demand for monarchs of this time period. Mesopotamia in the 500s, 600s BC was known for tyrannical dictators who were known for actually doing things like this. And so it wasn't that out of context for him. Still, not the type of situation you want to wake up to. Nebuchadnezzar was also very shrewd. He apparently mistrusted his advisors and magicians. He said of them in verse 9, "You have agreed to speak lying and corrupt words before me till the times change." And then he sees through their attempts to gain time and change the situation to one more favorable for themselves as well. They were requesting, "Please, just tell us the dream. We'd be happy to interpret it for you." But he refused. He appears impetuous. Dismembering your advisors does not seem like a rational response to their failure in a situation as difficult as the one he placed his advisors in. Some historians speculate that this was actually a calculated move, that ancient kings were intentionally unpredictable and violent in order to maintain the security of their absolute rule. But it is unclear if Nebuchadnezzar is being calculating here or if he is just really, really angry at his magicians for failing to meet his demands. It might also be worth noting that Nebuchadnezzar is a fairly new king at this time. This is the second year of Nebuchadnezzar's reign. And he seems like an old hand at political intrigue, but surprisingly, he hasn't been doing this very long. Interestingly, though, considering his responses to the pleas of the Chaldeans, Nebuchadnezzar also seems open to legitimate negotiation. Even after giving the command for all the wise men to be killed, he is willing to hear from Daniel and even relent from the destruction he promised when Daniel then explains to him the dream. Daniel even has a whole night to pray with his friends and receive the vision from the Lord. So this is Nebuchadnezzar. He's a complex character. And if we continue on in Daniel, you'll see a character arc building into the life of Nebuchadnezzar. Not necessarily an exemplary person at this time, but an interesting one nonetheless. So this is the person that Daniel is dealing with here. Now, finding you will be killed if you cannot both accurately relate and interpret someone else's dream. Not an ideal position to find yourself in. And knowing the nature of the man issuing the commands couldn't have been encouraging for Daniel or his friends. But the way Daniel handled the situation was truly exemplary. So we're going to spend the last bit of today's sermon looking at Daniel and kind of contrasting him with Nebuchadnezzar here. But for now, suffice it to say that God both revealed the dream and its interpretation to Daniel, saving the 4 men and all the rest of the wise men of Babylon from destruction. Daniel's revelation of the dream is part of the story we're going to actually read, so is the part we're going to read. So if you have your Bibles, please go to Daniel chapter 2, and we're going to begin at verse 25. Daniel chapter 2, verse 25. Daniel has just received the vision from the Lord. Would you all please stand, if you are able, for the reading of God's word. Then Arioch brought in Daniel before the king in haste and said thus to him, I have found among the exiles from Judah a man who will make known to the king the interpretation. The king declared to Daniel, whose name was Belteshazzar, Are you able to make known to me the dream that I have seen and its interpretation? Daniel answered the king and said, No wise men, enchanters, magicians, or astrologers can show to the king the mystery that the king has asked. But there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries, and he has made known to King Nebuchadnezzar what will be in the latter days. Your dream and the visions of your head as you lay in bed are these. To you, O king, as you lay in bed, came thoughts of what would be after this, and he who reveals mysteries made known to you what is to be. But as for me, this mystery has been revealed to me not because of any wisdom that I have, more than all the living, but in order that the interpretation may be known to the king, and that you may know the thoughts of your mind. You saw, O king, and behold, a great image. This image, mighty and of exceeding brightness, stood before you, and its appearance was frightening. The head of this image was of fine gold, its chest and arms of silver, its middle and thighs of bronze, its legs of iron, its feet partly of iron and partly of clay. As you looked, a stone was cut out by no human hand, and it struck the image on its feet of iron and clay and broke them in pieces. Then the iron, the clay, the bronze, the silver, and the gold all together were broken in pieces and became like the chaff of the summer threshing floors. And the wind carried them away so that not a trace of them could be found. But the stone that struck the image became a great mountain and filled the whole earth. This was the dream. Now we will tell the king its interpretation. You, O king, the King of kings, to whom the God of heaven has given the kingdom, the power, and the might, and the glory, and into whose hand he has given, wherever they dwell, the children of man, the beasts of the field, and the birds of the heavens, making you rule over them all. You are the head of gold. Another kingdom inferior to you shall arise after you, and yet a third kingdom of bronze, which shall rule over all the earth. And there shall be a fourth kingdom, strong as iron, because iron breaks to pieces and shatters all things. And like iron that crushes, it shall break and crush all these. And as you saw the feet and toes, partly of potter's clay and partly of iron, it shall be a divided kingdom. But some of the firmness of iron shall be in it, just as you saw iron mixed with the soft clay. And as the toes of the feet were partly iron and partly clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly brittle. As you saw the iron mixed with soft clay, so they will mix with one another in marriage, but they will not hold together, just as iron does not mix with clay. And in the days of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom that shall never be destroyed, nor shall the kingdom be left to another people. It shall break in pieces all these kingdoms and bring them to an end, and it shall stand forever. Just as you saw that a stone was cut from a mountain by no human hand, and that it broke in pieces the iron, the bronze, the clay, the silver, and the gold. A great God has made this known to the king. What shall be after this? The dream is certain, and the interpretation is sure. Then King Nebuchadnezzar fell upon his face and paid homage to Daniel, and commanded that an offering and incense be offered up to him. The king answered and said to Daniel, Truly, your God is God of gods and Lord of kings, and a revealer of mysteries, for you have been able to reveal this mystery. Then the king gave Daniel high honors and many great gifts, and made him ruler over the whole province of Babylon, and the chief prefect over all the wise men of Babylon. Daniel made a request of the king, and he appointed Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego over the affairs of the province of Babylon. But Daniel remained at the king's court. You may be seated. This is quite a dream. Daniel presents it in verse 30 as a way for Nebuchadnezzar to know the thoughts of his mind, but retrospectively, we recognize that it certainly had a significance far beyond just helping an ancient king gain peace about his dreams. It was a predictive prophecy for the future, foretelling the political developments of the known world for the next several centuries and beyond. Each portion of the statue in the dream represents a very specific and traceable kingdom. So here is what the statue may have looked like. The head of gold in the dream is Babylon. Babylon existed as a great kingdom from 625 to 539 BC, and it includes the reign of Nebuchadnezzar and the story of Daniel, which we just read today. The dream itself and its interpretation were thought to have been given around 604 BC. So we're looking at about 6 centuries before the time of Christ. Then, in 539, the empire of the Medes and Persians, or the chest and arms of silver, they arose and defeated the Babylonians, initiating the reign of the next great world empire. Continuing until around 331 BC, the Medo-Persian Empire lasted considerably longer than the Babylonian Empire. So, interesting. The head of gold was a much shorter-lived kingdom than the silver. The belly and thighs of bronze is understood to be the Greek Empire. Although the Greek city-states were around for some time before this, they were distinct units and unable to unify themselves until they were conquered by the Macedonians, who in turn, under the leadership of Alexander the Great, swept across the entire known world at the time. Thus, the phrase in verse 39, this third kingdom shall rule over the whole world. While Alexander's Greek Empire didn't technically conquer the whole world, it subdued basically every area Alexander knew of to conquer, the whole world that they knew of at the time. The Greek Empire lasted from about 331 to 63 BC, when the last struggling remnants fell to the rising empire of the Romans, which is the fourth kingdom. The fourth kingdom is by far the most complex to explain. The statue has legs and feet of iron, but with some clay mixed into the feet. This indicates strength, the iron does, and the ability to crush things, which certainly matches Rome and what we know of this fourth kingdom. Rome as an empire endured from 63 BC until AD 476 by some metrics, when the city of Rome fell to Germanic tribes from the north. Now, that's when things get a little dicey with the timeline and with the interpretation of the prophecy. I'll try not to digress too far into speculation here. It's an interesting study. Some commentators believe that the toes of clay mixed with iron represent how the Roman Empire was composed of many different people groups who never really assimilated, leading to a weakening that predestined the fall of the Roman Empire. While others seem to think that the mixed nature of the feet refers to the split of the Roman Empire between the Byzantine Empire in the east and the Western Roman Empire, where they became, in some sense, two separate entities. Still, others believe that the Roman Empire lives on in Western civilization, particularly Europe and North America, and the 10 toes of the statue refer to multiple modern-day countries that apparently represent the Roman Empire. I even found handy little lists that people put together where they said, this country is this toe and that country is that toe. Or if you prefer, there are those who believe that America is the revived Roman Empire, and the clay and iron mix stands for the diversity of race and culture found within this country. But this whole discussion, it creates kind of a timeline question because of the fifth kingdom, the stone not cut by human hands, which pummels the statue and crushes it into a powder so fine it is caught up in the breeze and blown away. Now, this portion of the dream is fairly clearly a messianic prophecy predicting that the Christ, the stone that destroys the statue, the stumbling block, will come and establish a fifth kingdom greater than all the others, one which fills the whole world and stands forever. But if the iron legs and feet, the fourth kingdom, is only the Rome of antiquity, then the fifth kingdom will clearly refer to the first coming of Christ and the birth of the church, which then grows and grows, and by God's grace and power becomes greater than all the other kingdoms. But this interpretation could lead to a reading of Scripture that some would oppose, in which the church aids the world in becoming better and better until it's finally good enough for Christ to return in the second messianic age to begin. Or, if the iron legs and feet is the Rome of antiquity and modernity, if we are still living in a world governed by Roman thought, if America and Western civilization are included in the toes of iron and clay, does that mean that the stone has not yet struck the statue? Has the kingdom of the Messiah not yet been established? In my mind, the whole dispute boils down to one fundamental question. Are we currently living in the fourth or the fifth kingdom? In other words, has the Messiah's kingdom already been established, or is the stone currently hurtling through the sky, preparing to demolish the statue? My answer to this question, yes. In scriptural prophecy, there often seems to be both a near and a far fulfillment of prophecy. Maybe it's a bit of a cop-out to say that both versions are true, or contain at least true elements. But that seems to me the most satisfactory explanation, though I am no theologian, so if I'm spouting heresy, come talk to me later. But could it be that Christ already came once, died for us, saved us all, and established a church whose mission was to spread to the ends of the earth, while still recognizing that some of the elements of the earthly kingdoms remain? Maybe not all the fragments of the statue have yet blown away in the breeze, while Christ prepares a second and ultimate iteration of the fifth kingdom that will remove beyond a shadow of a doubt all traces of the old kingdoms of the world and establish a world truly, perfectly, completely whole, and free from imperfection. I like to think so. One other small timeline note: some liberal theologians believe it's impossible that Daniel's interpretation of the dream could have been a futuristic prophecy, as futuristic prophecies are scientifically impossible in their minds. So they moved the date that they believed Daniel was written from like 604 BC to more like 100, like the first or second century BC. And then they say that the head of gold is still Babylon, but the silver is actually the Medes, just the Medes, not the Medes and Persians. And then the bronze is the Persians, and then the iron is the Greeks. And that way, Daniel will have written all of this during the time of the Greeks, and all of these empires will have already existed, and it's not a predictive prophecy, and everything's fine. But we, of course, can safely dispose of this revisionist approach, because we serve a God who is all-knowing and completely able to reveal the future to his servants, should he choose. This only adds to the mystery and majesty of God. And this prophecy, written over 500 years before some of the events it predicts, is a testament to the enduring truth of Scripture. So, after all this, timeline disputes aside, what is the actual significance of all of this for us today? Both the story of Daniel and the interpretation of the dream. How does this affect the way that we live? Well, I find the dream itself quite encouraging in terms of assurance of our future as Christians. We might point to the dream and say, wait a second, it appears to me that some of this hasn't taken place yet. How can we be sure that the Messianic kingdom will completely supersede the rest of the kingdoms of the world? Looks to me like there's still plenty of petty kingdoms doing petty kingdom things around us. How can we know that the fifth kingdom will truly stand forever? But that's the beauty of prophecy. It claims to tell the future, and you can tell the good ones from the bad ones because the good ones come true and the bad ones don't. This prophecy included details about 5 kingdoms, and 4 of them have already verifiably taken place in just the way that the prophecy predicted. This seems to point strongly to the overall trustworthiness of the prophecy and reinforces our faith in a future that looks incredibly promising. As people of God, it's hard not to be excited about what we read in the prophecy of the fifth kingdom. In addition to a general encouragement about our position as children of God, there are many practical examples of good ways to live and how to handle adversity in this story, thanks to the character and steadfastness of Daniel himself. So earlier, we looked at what Nebuchadnezzar was like. Now let's take a look at what Daniel is like. And I think it's safe to say that his actions will stand in stark contrast to Nebuchadnezzar. And again, I recognize we didn't read the whole chapter, so we didn't actually read about some of these things, but you can always check up on me later. While Nebuchadnezzar was an absolute ruler of a large empire, Daniel was, for the time being at least, a political nobody. He was a captive in exile. Now, if you remember from the last sermon I preached from Daniel, the trial period of the Hebrews was going to last for 3 years before they would be presented to the king for their examination, and he would decide whether or not they were fit to serve in his court. Well, today's story happened in only the 2nd year of Nebuchadnezzar's reign, making it possible that Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael and Azariah were still in their vegetable and water days, waiting to appear before the king when they got the news that they were to be executed because the magicians of the king's court had failed. Now, the response to this news is also in contrast with the king's personality. While Nebuchadnezzar was an impetuous and hasty king in his decision-making, Daniel and his friends immediately turned to God in prayer, not wishing to move any direction without first consulting the one who knows all outcomes. Additionally, Daniel showed a clear faith in God even before he received any revelation from God. When Daniel, in verse 16, made an appointment with the king to give the interpretation of the dream, he didn't yet know what the interpretation was. He had not received a vision yet. He trusted that God would reveal it to him before the time of his appointment. He believed that his God, unlike the gods of the Chaldeans, was in fact a God who dwelt with man. Daniel, when dealing with people in authority over him, was also polite and respectful. He spoke the truth completely and honestly, not holding anything back, but also with a level-headedness not reflective of the angry or insulting tones of the king or the wheedling, desperate tones of the magicians trying desperately to save their skins. But perhaps most importantly, Daniel gave complete glory and honor to God, crediting himself with none of his accomplishments and making sure everyone knew it was only because of the surpassing might of God that he was able to interpret the dream or do anything good. Verses 20 to 23 record a prayer of blessing. Daniel prayed, thanking God for the way he upheld Daniel and shaped the course of history. And verse 25 shows Arioch, the captain of the king's guard, trying to claim some of the credit for himself, just for being the one to bring Daniel to the king. He said, I have found among the exiles from Judah a man who will make known to the king the interpretation. Wants a little bit of the credit. Daniel, on the other hand, who would actually be the one to interpret the dream for the king, refused to take any credit for himself, saying, no wise men, enchanters, magicians, or astrologers can show to the king the mystery that the king has asked. But there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries and has made it known to King Nebuchadnezzar what will be in the latter days. Recognizing that this was a work of God, not a work of his own hand, Daniel gave credit where credit was due. And then when the king recognized that the dream was, in fact, the dream that he had dreamed, Daniel wasn't just making stuff up. He remembered the dream. He honored and promoted Daniel, but this was the choice of the king, not the request of Daniel. The only thing that Daniel himself asked for was that his 3 friends would be promoted as well, a request which the king granted. So the only reward Daniel sought was for his friends, not for himself. Now, I wonder how I would respond if I were placed in similar circumstances, adversity like Daniel was facing. Despite living up until this point a fairly easy life of blessing and prosperity and comfort, I still trust to honor God. I still struggle to trust God in every circumstance, especially the ones where the results seem unclear. My first reaction to a tough situation is not always to turn to God in prayer. I'm usually not okay with being a nobody, seeking selfish advancement instead. And I generally love to get credit for the things I have done rather than giving God full credit for accomplishing good in and through my life. If campus security came and told me the board of directors would have me killed if I couldn't answer an impossible question, would I rage against the injustice of an unfair world? Or would I immediately seek guidance from my omnipotent Father who can offer the solution? Would I trust him to accomplish good in my life regardless of how bleak the situation looked? Would you? The kingdoms of this world may be devolving around us. If you look at the way that the statue goes, it starts with gold, then goes to silver, then bronze, then iron. Increasingly strong, but decreasingly glorious. As the kingdoms of this world devolve around us, we can rest assured in the fact that we are not members of the kingdoms of this world. We live in the hope of the present and coming fifth kingdom, led by the great stone, under which all other kingdoms will be subdued, and under whose authority the whole world will be governed for all eternity. I pray that the hope of this kingdom enables us to live lives of faith like the one Daniel led, and to trust God in every circumstance. And as Daniel prayed in chapter 2, blessed be the name of God forever and ever, to whom belong wisdom and might. He changes times and seasons. He removes kings and sets up kings. He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to those who have understanding. He reveals deep and hidden things. He knows what is in the darkness, and the light dwells with him. To you, O God of my fathers, I give thanks and praise, for you have given me wisdom and might, and have now made known to me what we asked of you. That is the King that we serve, and his kingdom will last forever.